Welcome to Volume 7 of Shoot Interview Classics. Today we have with us one of the more colorful characters of the pro wrestling world. Certainly one who has seen his share of ups and downs, a man of many gimmicks.
I lived every one.
Indeed. We'll be going into every one of them. He is Michael Harding. Grand Central Publishing has published his autobiographical novel, Living the Gimmick.
It's a work of fiction, my friend. Work of fiction. That way nobody gets sued. Actually, Truman Capote wrote a book, In Cold Blood, and he referred to it as, I think it was like the first nonfiction fiction novel, if that makes any sense. But that's kind of how I see my book, Living the Gimmick.
Only nobody gets killed in your book.
Nobody gets, somebody dies, but...
Well, we'll get to that. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, so now you published this book under pseudonym of Ben Peller.
Yeah.
Is that so you don't get sued?
Basically, some of the things that go on in this book, I don't want my family to find out about. He said, as he conducted a shoot interview that's probably going to be on the internet and YouTube and all that kind of thing, but what the hell, my family doesn't go on the internet that much anyway, so I think I'll be okay. And as far as, quite frankly, as far as the pseudonym goes, let's just say, I used to know a guy named Ben Peller, and he was a total asshole, so I think... he's a good guy. But he's not going to sue me, I know that, so I figured this would be kind of like, appropriate final gimmick kind of thing.
Okay, well, we hope you'll be shooting here today.
Both barrels.
All right, let's start off with how you first got interested in pro wrestling.
Quite frankly, when I was, my father passed away when I was very young, and he was from Canada, and if you notice my Canadian accent throughout the interview, that's why he didn't go to the dungeon or anything like that, but he grew up outside of Montreal, and he passed on when I was very young, and my mom was working hard and what have you, and so I never had a father figure growing up, and what happened was, I was a member of the Boy Scouts and all that, and one day there was like a father-son softball game or whatever, and I felt weird enough already because I didn't have a father. So, but then, and that day I remember, after the game, and boys will be boys, somehow people started, this group of 3 or 4 guys started making fun of me, calling me a bastard for not having a father and all that. And, kids can be cruel. So I ran home crying. And it was a Saturday afternoon, so I got home, I was crying, I just, wanted distraction. And I turned on the TV, and Saturday afternoon wrestling was on. And I saw these men, these human beings, but they were larger than life. They were huge, and they were they were fighting, going at it, and then 2 guys ganged up on one and threw him out of the ring. But the guy came back in the ring and flattened them both. I don't remember who it was, if it were the Warriors or not. I forget the tag team. It was the Warriors. Anyway, they were ganging up on someone. They threw him out of the ring. The guy came back and nailed both of them. And I remember looking at it, going, "Oh my God, I want to be like these guys. I want to live this." Sorry, I'm checking my phone here. Sorry about that. Okay. People be calling me. I'll probably put it on mute or something. Sorry about that. Right, but anyway, I wanted to be like these men in the ring, and that was my first kind of exposure to pro wrestling. And then I got it in my brain to kind of follow through on that.
Nice. So in the book, Living the Gimmick, you mentioned a big event in your teenage life as a fan was meeting Sonny Logan, WWO heavyweight champion.
The American Dream.
You met him backstage when you were around 15, 16 years old, something like that. Could you tell us a little bit more about how this happened, how this came to be?
I was a 16-year-old Mark, and I was at a pro wrestling show at the Rosemont Horizon. I remember that before it became the 3Com Arena or whatever the hell it is today. There was a Rosemont Horizon, and there was a place you could go beneath the bleachers. You had to go duck underneath the bleachers, and there was a way to get backstage. And I waited for the end of a match one night. I waited for the end of a match. The house lights were still down, and as everyone leapt to their feet, the house lights were still down. So I was able to get back and get backstage. And I came out underneath the bleachers right by the red curtain. The wide red line, as we used to call it, the red curtain that separates the backstage from, the insanity of the arena and the fans. Yeah. So it separates the fans. It's a barrier between backstage and the fans. I got back there, and I slipped behind the curtain, and actually I waited, I hung out, and I saw then Sonny Logan. He had wrestled Cowboy Jesse Buke, I believe it was, and they had wrestled that night. They had a match. They were hitting each other. They were pounding each other and all that.
Yeah.
And this was, you gotta understand, this was dating myself here, before the internet, before like pro wrestling dirt sheets, before, all those websites.
Yeah.
Before, this was back when, even like, I think Time Magazine had an article, is pro wrestling fake or real? This was back when reporters were getting smacked around for daring to suggest that it was fake. And people had their suspicions. I had my suspicions, but nobody really knew. And here I'm seeing, these two opponents, Sonny Logan and Jesse Buke, shaking hands, joking around with each other. Wow. They had just been beating the crap out of each other 10 minutes before in the ring, and now they're backstage. So that was my first introduction to it being a work. And oddly enough, it made it even more appealing to me because it was a work, and that there was so much camaraderie. It was just, it seemed like a traveling circus. Night after night, they do this wonderful thing. And that night, Sonny Logan shook my hand, said, "How you doing, brother?" And I was hooked. And I said, "This is what I want to do." And from that, I was already kind of lifting weights, but then I just started, massively going after this goal. It was my goal at that point. That's when it crystallized, I guess I'd say.
So, what was your family's reaction when they learned that, you came back home from this this whole experience, meeting Sonny Logan and stuff,
right.
and you went to them and said, "Hey, you know what? I want to be a pro wrestler."
Well, my mom I'd already expressed to her an interest in it, it ranged from amusement to disbelief, because you understand, when I was 14, 15, I was probably all of a $120. I was 5'5", 120 pounds, not exactly pro wrestling material. So my mom was like, okay, cool, what have you. She went along with it, but then her emotion gradually turned to one of horror, because I was getting bigger. I was lifting weights. I was getting pumped up, and I was eating, and she realized I was serious about this shit.
Yeah.
Other kids were worried about their SATs, their ACTs. I was worried about my bench press. I needed to get bigger, And she's like, okay, Michael, we have to have a talk about this,
Yeah.
So basically, she was uncomfortable with it towards the end when it looked like I was really going to do it. My grandfather, on the other hand, my grandfather, he was the only one who really supported me and said, "Go for it and follow that dream." And he helped me out in so many ways. And God rest him, I would never have been able to follow that dream. I follow my dream of being a pro wrestler and finding myself if it were not for him. So God rest him. He was a wonderful man.
So your grandfather, he was the one that supported you mainly, and he was the one that basically funded you going to
pro wrestling school, Shane Stratford.
Shane Stratford's Wrestling Academy. Now, how did you learn about this wrestling academy?
Well, it's funny. Again, this was before the internet. This was before, Tough Enough and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
At this time, professional wrestling was still very much a closed sport, a closed art form. You pretty much, you had to know somebody. I didn't know anybody. So at the time, there were these magazines, Pro Wrestling Monthly kind of mags. They were like the Sports Illustrated of pro wrestling. And the editor was a guy named Buck Dipter. And I wrote him a letter, again, no email back then. I wrote him a letter, asking him if he knew of any pro wrestling schools. That's all I knew how to do. I mean, I was big, but I wasn't that big, I was never that big. Even in my career, I was never that big, even after I got on steroids and all that, which I'm sure we'll get to. Yeah. He never wrote back. Thanks a lot, Buck. He never wrote back. So I started going into some of the independent wrestling magazines, and I saw an article about Shane Stratford's pro wrestling school. It had a phone number for it. I called. He called back.